2022 is shaping up to be a really competitive year for real estate. My name is Devin Cook. I'm a real estate agent here in Utah, and I'm going to be discussing how to win an offer in 2022. So this will be extremely applicable if you're a buyer looking to buy a house, if you're a new agent looking to win offers, or if you're a seller and you want to know what to look for in the offers that you get. So first up, a bit of a recap on what it takes to buy a house, and then I'm going to go through each point in detail. First step is you need to get an agent that actually knows what they're doing. Step 2 is you need to get pre-approved with a very strong lender. This is going to be extremely helpful, and we're going to talk about this a lot. And step number 3, this is the important part, is writing the offer. And this is where I'm going to spend most of my time in this video. And within that offer, you're going to have a bunch of different terms. You're going to have terms like whether or not you're offering cash or financing, what purchase price you're offering, how much earnest money you're offering with the offer, how long is your due diligence period or option period as it's called in other states, your details with your appraisal and financing contingency, special assessments, home warranties, and your closing or settlement dates. And then once your offer is accepted, you're typically going to have an inspection on the home. You're going to have a due diligence period that you need to get through and any negotiations with the sellers about repairs. You'll work with your lender to get that appraisal back and to get final loan approval. And then you're going to do a walkthrough on the property, usually 1 or 2 days before you close on the house. And then on the day of settlement, you're going to go to the title company, at least here in Utah or in Texas, where I also sold real estate. And you're going to sign all of the documents and you're going to bring the money you need to close on the house. And then once the lender and title company have sent all the money where it needs to be and the loan has funded, you can pick up the keys and move into your new home. Congratulations. So that's the goal for you as a buyer, to get into your dream home and be at that point where you get to pick up the keys and move in. So now let's go through everything more in depth so you know how to get to that point. And while I'm currently a real estate agent in Utah, I also used to sell houses in Texas for a couple of years before moving here to Utah. And all of the things that I'm going to be sharing in this video will work in any market across the United States. Utah is one of the hottest markets we have right now. Texas is also a very hot market. And so the tactics that I'll be explaining are going to work for pretty much any market that you're going to come across, because we're having to be extremely aggressive. And if you do live in a market that's not quite as hot as Utah or Texas or Idaho or Phoenix or some of these other markets that are just going crazy, as a buyer, you won't have to be as aggressive with your offers in those different markets. So going back to step number 1 is you need to get yourself a really strong agent. And this is going to be huge. You're going to need to have an agent that is familiar with all or most of the things that I'm going to be discussing in this video. You need a real estate agent that will know how to write an offer to give you the best chances to win the house that you're trying to buy, but also know how to balance that with protecting your best interests so you don't lose a bunch of money. Now, step number 2 is extremely important, and I don't think enough buyers and enough real estate agents put as much emphasis on getting pre-approved with a strong lender as they really should. Especially in today's market, every little thing that you can do to set your offer apart from the rest of the competition that are offering on the house is going to help yours stand out and give you a better chance of winning the home. So if you're looking to get pre-approved with your local bank or a credit union, that could actually hurt your chances of winning the offer on the home that you're offering on. And that's just because credit unions and local banks don't have a great reputation in the real estate industry for meeting deadlines and providing great service. Instead, you're much better off going with a reputable mortgage lender who focuses on mortgages. Loan officers at credit unions and banks are typically going to work a 9-to-5 job, but they're not going to be working weekends, which is kind of problematic when a lot of the things that happen in real estate happen on the weekends. That's when we're most writing offers, and that's when we need to have constant contact with your lender. And a good reputable lender is going to be available in the evenings and also on the weekends, which is going to be extremely helpful to getting your offer in and getting your offer accepted. And once you have all of your documents ready to submit to the lender, a good lender is going to have a pre-approval letter back to you in about 24 hours after submitting those documents. And then also a good lender is going to be calling the listing agent on whatever house that you're offering on to show them and tell them how well qualified you are and how simple and easy the process of working with them and working with you is going to be. And this is a good way to think about the difference between mortgage lenders and credit unions and banks. Imagine you have a Ferrari. Are you going to take that Ferrari to just any old mechanic, or are you going to take them to the authorized Ferrari dealer, or at least an Italian specialized mechanic that works on Ferraris and Lamborghinis and other Italian sports cars? It's the same thing with getting pre-approved and choosing a lender. You want to pick the lender that is specialized in writing loans for mortgages and will give you the best chance of winning an offer. And that option is going with the trusted and reputable lender. So now that you're pre-approved, you have a great lender, you got to write the offer. But before we get into those tactics, you really need to understand the psychology of writing the offer. You need to understand where the sellers are coming from, what the sellers want to see, and you got to put yourself in their shoes. So if you were to sell a house right now in today's market or any market, what are the 3 main things that you're going to want to see in any offer, and especially in the offer that you choose? Number 1, you're going to want to see the high purchase price. Typically the higher the better, because sellers want to make as much money as possible. And number 2 is you're going to want to see a closing date that works with your time frame, and typically that's going to be as quick of a closing as possible. And the third, and maybe the most important thing that sellers want to see in any offer, are guarantees. guarantees. They're gonna wanna see guarantees that the buyer is not gonna back out. They're gonna wanna see guarantees that they're gonna actually pay the purchase price that they're offering in the offer. And they're gonna wanna just have as many guarantees that this process is gonna be as smooth as possible. So here's an example offer that would probably win in pretty much any situation. Say you have a house that you're selling for $500,000, that's what it's listed at, and someone offers you $600,000 in cash, which is 20% over what you were asking for. And they're also gonna waive their due diligence period. They're not getting an inspection. Since it's cash, they won't need an appraisal. They're gonna close in a week, and they're giving you $100,000 of non-refundable earnest money upon acceptance of their offer. That's about as good as it gets, unless you got the same offer from someone else that was like $625,000. Pretty much the only thing that can win in that situation is the same terms but a higher purchase price. So your goal as a buyer is to make an offer that is as close to that offer as possible, because those offers are pretty much guaranteed to win every time. Now I know everybody's not in the situation where you can be so aggressive, and not everybody can pay cash for a home, waive appraisals, waive due diligence periods, and offer $100,000 in non-refundable earnest money. That's exactly why you need a great real estate agent, so they can tailor the offer to be the most appealing to the sellers as possible, while also protecting your best interests. Now enough psychology, now for the tactics. Now first off is the purchase price and whether or not you're gonna be offering cash for the house or you're gonna be financing it. With the purchase price, pretty much always the higher the better. The sellers want to make as much money as possible, so if you can offer more money to buy the house, that's going to put you in a better situation to win. Here in Utah, it's not uncommon for homes to be selling for 10 to 20% over list price, and sometimes even higher than that. Offering 10% over these days is almost the standard to offer on a new listing. And I know that can be a tough pill to swallow, but that's just the reality of the market that we're dealing with. Now let's talk about cash or financing. Cash is great for mainly two different reasons. Number one is because you can close really quickly. 3 days is the absolute quickest you can close, and that can be really appealing to a lot of sellers. Although most cash buyers don't close in 3 days, they usually close in about 5 to 7. And the second reason why cash is so great is because you don't need an appraisal, and so if you're offering over list price, the sellers won't be worried about the property meeting value and you trying to renegotiate if the appraisal comes in low. However, with financing, if you do have a strong lender, you can close in about 2 weeks if you have a really good lender that's on their game. And you can also choose to pay the appraisal gap, which I'll cover more later, and so that's going to make your offer very competitive and very similar to a cash offer, even though you're financing. Now, if you're going to finance the house, having a strong down payment is going to go a long way to showing the sellers that you're really serious and that you're really well qualified to buy their home. Now, the next term is earnest money, and earnest money is just money that you're paying up front once the offer is accepted. This money is going to be held by the title company in an escrow account, and the contract will stipulate who gets that earnest money should the buyer or seller default on the contract. And at closing, that earnest money is going to go towards the buyer's down payment and closing costs. And a good rule of thumb for earnest money is to offer 1 to 2% earnest money with your offer. So that means on a $500,000 house, you're offering between $5,000 and $10,000 in earnest money. And if you can offer even more, that just makes the offer more aggressive. Now, in a normal market that isn't so biased towards the sellers, your earnest money will be protected by 2 different ways. One is through your due diligence period, where you're gonna get an inspection, you're gonna go through all the things about the house that may be wrong with it, which there's gonna be a ton, don't be worried about that. You can renegotiate with the sellers, and if you choose to back out, you get that earnest money back. The second way in a normal market that your earnest money is protected is by your financing contingency, which just stipulates that if for whatever reason you're not able to get financing on the house, that you can back out of the contract under that financing contingency, and you can receive your earnest money back in full. However, with the market conditions that we have in Utah and with any other hot real estate market, we're often having to tweak those terms a little bit. So one of the things you can do with your earnest money to make your offer even more aggressive is offer either a portion of it or all of it as non-refundable. For example, if you're offering on a $500,000 house and you're offering $10,000 in earnest money upon acceptance of your offer, you can stipulate in the contract that say $2,500 of the earnest money is non-refundable once they accept your offer. And that can be really appealing to the sellers because that's going to guarantee them $2,500 even if you back out of the contract. Remember, sellers love guarantees. And that also makes it much less appetizing for you as a buyer to back out knowing you would lose $2,500. So you have a lot more skin in the game in that situation. And you can also be even more aggressive by offering the full $10,000 as non-refundable upon acceptance of your offer. And keep in mind throughout this video that I'm not suggesting you use each one of these tactics in your offer. I'm just here to give you some strategies that you can use and that will give you a higher chance of winning, but you should be discussing these with your agent, and you should know all the risks involved. And another option with the earnest money is you can make either all or a portion of that earnest money non-refundable after your due diligence period has concluded, and then you can make another portion non-refundable after the financing contingency is concluded. These are both great options. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions. And also in the description are my social links, so if you have more involved questions, you can just DM me on Instagram and we can get in touch. Now let's talk about your due diligence period or your option period. This is a specified amount of days that you can back out of the contract and typically, unless you've tweaked the terms, get your earnest money back. Remember that the strongest offer that you can write would have your due diligence period just completely waived. You wouldn't get one. But also remember that having a due diligence period is extremely important because that's when you're gonna have the inspection done on your home. The inspector is gonna spend 2 to 3 hours at the house and they're gonna give you a 40, 50 page report of a list of 20, 30 things wrong with the house. And not everything they flag is a big deal. They could be flagging things like squeaky door hinges, light bulbs that are out, and just simple stuff like that. But just do be aware that it's extremely rare that you get an inspection back on a house and the inspector finds nothing wrong. I've never seen that happen. And with this inspection being done, that's when you're gonna also find out about the water heater, the HVAC, the furnace, the roof, the foundation, all of the real big ticket items that you need to know about your home. You wanna make sure it's in good structural condition and that all the major appliances are working properly. So if you waive your due diligence period, then you're putting yourself at a big risk. And you need to know that going into it if you do decide to waive that due diligence period. So if you're not comfortable waiving your due diligence period, the next best thing is just to make a very short due diligence period, typically between 3 to 5 days. And if you have a good agent, they're gonna have a great inspector that you can use and that is gonna be able to get into the house and get you a report in about 48 hours, maybe max of 72 hours. Now the next thing is your financing contingency and your appraisal. Your financing contingency is like your due diligence period, but for your financing. This is just a time window that you have where you get all of your documents into the lender, you get the appraisal back, and they give you that final golden stamp of approval, that final loan approval, so you can buy the house and get the loan. Talk with your lender to see how long they need to give you that clear to close, and then you can use this as your financing contingency deadline. Try saying financing contingency deadline 3 times fast. That's quite the mouthful. So if your lender can get you final loan approval in about 2 weeks, then you're gonna set that as your financing deadline, and the shorter it is, obviously the more attractive it is for the sellers. Now for the appraisal. When you're financing a house, in most cases, you're gonna need to get an appraisal on the home unless you can get an appraisal waiver. But in order to get an appraisal waiver on a house, you're typically gonna need at least 20% as a down payment. So I'm just gonna address this issue like you are getting an appraisal because most people do. So going back to the example of our $500,000 house, say it's listed for $500,000 and you offer $575,000, so $75,000 over what it's listed at. What happens if the appraisal comes back at $550,000? That means that the lender is only gonna lend up to $550,000 for that house, minus your down payment. And in a more balanced market, you can typically renegotiate with the sellers to meet somewhere in the middle or have them bring that price down to the $550,000 mark. But we're not in a balanced market right now. We're in a very extreme seller's market. And sellers are very aware that if you offer $1 million on their $500,000 home, it's obviously not gonna appraise for $1 million, and no lender would write that loan. And that's why a lot of buyers are using an appraisal guarantee, also known as an appraisal gap guarantee. This is where, as a buyer, you commit to paying either all or a portion of the gap amount between your purchase price and the appraisal amount. So if the appraisal comes back at $550,000 and you're offering $575,000, by guaranteeing the appraisal gap, you would be telling the sellers that you're gonna bring $25,000 additional in cash to make the deal happen and make sure that you can close. And you can also just guarantee a portion of that, but guaranteeing the full amount is obviously gonna be the most aggressive. And sellers love this because it guarantees the price that you're offering on this house, and they know they're gonna get that amount, and they know they're not gonna have to renegotiate with you at any time in the future. On that same $500,000 house, if you offer $1 million, but it's contingent upon it being appraised for that much, versus someone else that says they're gonna pay $750,000 for that house, but they waive the appraisal, they guarantee the appraisal gap, the sellers are probably gonna go with that $750,000 offer because even though on the surface the $1 million offer is more, without guaranteeing the appraisal, they know it's not gonna appraise for anywhere near that $1 million amount, and so they would rather take that guaranteed $750K. Now for the home warranty. In the purchase contract, there's a section where you can ask the sellers to pay for a home warranty. This usually will cost about $500, but can vary based upon the size of the home that you're making the offer on. Don't ask for this. Even if you're dealing with one additional offer, Don't ask the sellers to pay this, you can pay it yourself, and not asking them to buy you a home warranty is just one more thing that's going to make your offer a lot more attractive. Now the other terms are special assessments and HOA transfer fees. If the home you're buying is in an HOA, there's typically going to be some HOA transfer fees, and you can usually elect to have the sellers pay for those, to split them with the sellers, or to pay for them all yourself. The most aggressive option would be to just pay those HOA transfer fees yourself, or you could ask the seller to pay for them, or you can split them with the sellers. It all depends on how aggressive you want to be. And you also have a similar situation with special assessments. Special assessments can be a lot of different things. They can be a special tax that's levied on the property. They could be an HOA assessment fee that's levied on the property to replace the roof if it's a townhome or a condo. And there's really just a lot of things that fall under this special assessments umbrella. And similar situation with the HOA transfer fees, you can choose to pay for them yourself, ask the sellers to pay for them, or split them equally. And again, paying them yourself is the most aggressive, although it is pretty common for sellers to be paying these special assessment fees. And the last terms for the contract is the closing, also known as the settlement date. This is the day that you're going to sign all of the documents, you have gotten final loan approval, and you're going to be paying the money that you need, your down payment and all of your closing costs, so that way you can buy the house and now you can move in. And most sellers are going to want to close really quickly. Even if they ask for a lease back, they still want to close as quickly as possible so they have the peace of mind knowing that their home is officially sold. Especially because most sellers need the proceeds from that home in order to go buy their next home. So they typically want to close as fast as possible. Now those are all the typical terms for an offer, and that should give you a really good idea of how to write a strong offer and win. But there's also a couple other things that you should know as well. First is that your real estate agent should be providing an offer summary to the listing agent and the sellers whenever they submit your offer. And this is just going to be either a document or an email where they summarize all of the terms in your contract so they don't have to go through the contract digging for them. And this is especially helpful if the sellers have multiple offers on the home, because your offer is going to be a lot easier to read and digest, and this slight little edge can really help out, and you'd be surprised about how these little things can stack up and help you win an offer. And as the buyer, you can also choose to write a letter to the sellers and just let them know about why you love their house so much, what your situation is, what plans you have for the home. And I typically tell my clients, if you can get the sellers to, break a tear, is that a term, break a tear? Shed a tear. If you can get the sellers to shed a tear while reading that letter, I think that's a pretty good sign. Remember that most sellers have lived in their homes for a long time. They're emotionally attached to it, and so they want to know that their home is going to have good new owners. Now, the second thing to know is communication, communication, communication. And this is really going to be the responsibility of your real estate agent. They need to over communicate with the seller and with the listing agent. When your agent is booking your showing, when they're writing the offer, when they're at the showing, after writing the offer, after getting the offer accepted, pretty much all the time and as many times as possible, your agent needs to be communicating with the listing agent so they know how well qualified you are and how serious you are as a buyer and how much you want to buy their home. Also, your agent can ask the listing agent what terms the sellers are specifically looking for in an offer, and sometimes they can even get a good idea of where your offer needs to be in terms of the terms for it to be the most aggressive and most appealing to the sellers. And third, and this is really for you as the buyer, this is the mindset that you need to be in if you want to win an offer. Ask yourself this when you write an offer on any home. At what point would you stop being mad that you lost that house by $1,000? Said another way, offer the most possible and the best possible terms in your offer, such that if you lost the offer by $100, you could sleep at night knowing that you put your best foot and your best offer forward. If you're trying to win a home that's going to have 10 or 20 offers, it doesn't make any sense to offer anything less than your absolute best offer right up front. Offering anything less than your best is just going to waste your time, your agent's time, the seller's time, and nobody's going to end up happy. So write the best offer you possibly can right up front, because oftentimes you're only going to get one chance to win the house. Let me know what questions you have. Good luck, and thanks for watching.